Thank you for joining us for our AgEx student discovery session. I'm Heather Watson, Executive Director at Farm Management Canada, and I'm joined here today by Kerr, studying at Lakeland College, and Dmytriw, studying at the University of Manitoba. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, colleges and universities were quick to respond by taking their classrooms online. We've invited Autumn and Adam here today to discuss their COVID-19 learning experience. How have they transitioned from in-class to online and everything in between? And are there insights that we can use to inform future learning and the best experience for agricultural students? So welcome, Autumn and Adam. Before we dive into the questions, I'm wondering, could you just take a moment to perhaps introduce yourselves? Let's start with Autumn.
Hi, I'm Autumn Kerr. I go to Lakeland College in Vermilion, Alberta. I am taking the crop technology program and I'm currently in my second year. Lakeland also has a student managed farm as part of their crop technology program. And this year I am their assistant general manager of that farm. So I get to help all the students expand on their agriculture knowledge with hands-on learning, which is pretty cool.
Awesome. We've heard a lot of wonderful things about the student managed farm for sure. So that's great. And Adam, over to you.
Hi, my name is Dmytriw, and I'm studying at the School of Agriculture at the University of Manitoba. I'm in the Agriculture Diploma program, and I'm in year 2. I'm also a student ambassador at the University of Manitoba. My role there is to help encourage and recruit new students to come join me at the School of Agriculture.
Awesome. Well, thanks to both of you for being with me here today. We look forward to learning how this, crazy journey has been from the student experience. And so I've got a lot of questions. And so I think we'll just dive right in. And of course, if anyone has questions or comments, feel free to use the chat box and let us know what you're thinking, or even share your experience as we go through today's discussion. So perhaps starting with you, Adam, this time, could you tell us a little bit more about the program that you're studying and what interested you in the program and what you hope to be doing when you're finished?
So the Agriculture Diploma program, for me, I saw it as a way to enhance my business management knowledge. I'm a mature student and I returned to school specifically to gain more experience in understanding how to actually run an operation. I have been working in the greenhouse industry for the past 10 years, both here in Winnipeg and in Montreal for 2 years. And I really hope to use my experience in school to one day run my own greenhouse and small farm operation.
That's awesome. That's music to my ears, Adam. Going back to school to brush up on the business skills. I love it. And Autumn, how about you?
So I come from a small, like a 70 head commercial cow-calf operation, which is about in central Alberta, more or less. And so I chose to come into crops because it's something I don't have any background with. I'm great with my animals, but didn't know anything about the crop management side. And I also know all the career opportunities that come with ag retail and agronomy and all of that sort of stuff. So I'm doing the 2 years here at Lakeland to get the hands-on learning experience and the more practical side. And then I will be transferring to University of Alberta next year to get my bachelor's degree in crop science, to become a professional agrologist, and then hopefully work with farmers and help them come with good solutions and economical solutions for their operations. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, we hear more and more schools are kind of offering that diploma degree kind of hybrid program to kind of get the best of both worlds with your hands-on and, you're maybe more theoretical, but all the while, taking advantage of the different types of learning styles and learning opportunities. So that's very cool.
And to be in a small town and then transferred to a city is a nice touch, because I come from a very small town, so it's an easier transition.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I came from a small town as well, and then to kind of a little bit of a larger town, and now I'm in the big city of Ottawa. So yeah, I had to give my driving skills a little bit of a brush up, but it's an interesting transition, that's for sure. All right, that's great. And then, so what's on my mind is kind of, where were you when everything shut down, when, the COVID-19 global pandemic hit, where were you in particular with your studies or with your education? And a follow-up question to that is, did that have any impact on your decision to continue with studies or what you were going to study? So kind of two questions there, and maybe I'll flip it around and start with Autumn first, if that's all right.
So since I went to college right after high school, when COVID first hit, I was halfway done my grade 12 year. And so we started off with everything in high school, which made applying to college interesting because I didn't know what I was walking into and what the world was going to kind of be like for that first year. So that was a bit of an interesting transition, but it worked well. You really had to open up your mind to different ways to meet people because there wasn't any campus social events, no way to like get to know everyone. But it worked it was pretty well. I didn't think that I wasn't gonna go to college after. Like I didn't think about taking the year off because of COVID. So yeah, coming from not knowing what the school year was going to be with and not knowing how I was going to make friends with COVID being on, like not being able to have social events, I was trying to work on a healthy transition. So I never thought about not going to college after high school, but I definitely considered how I was going to do it that didn't affect my mental health or like made me lonely and not want to just want to go home every weekend. So COVID didn't affect the decision to go to school, but it did affect my decision as how I was going to make it a good experience, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense because I'm thinking it was a long time ago now, but I remember when I went off to school, it was kind of just being plunged into that totally different space. And, I was sharing a room with 4 girls. There were no walls between us. And, it's a totally different social experiment, but social aspect. So then, you're surrounded by friends. And when it comes to, work-life balance or, school work and life balance, I think it's an important point you bring up and something that maybe we can come back to in terms of, mental health and isolation and socialization. And, maybe some of the things that you tried, or maybe some of the things that even the school tried to overcome those challenges. So yeah, that's great. I appreciate those comments very much. And Adam, how about you? Where were you and, in your studies when COVID hit, and did that have an impact on your decision to come back to school or what that would look like for you as an experience?
So I actually wasn't studying when COVID hit. I was living in Montreal working for Lufa Farms. They build fully hydroponic greenhouses on top of rooftops in downtown Montreal and sell all the produce to their customers all across the greater Montreal area. So I came back to Winnipeg, back home to my parents in May 2020 after living in COVID in Montreal for 8 weeks in the early stages of the pandemic when it didn't look like things were going to be slowing down anytime soon. And it wasn't until I came home and started thinking, what are my next steps going to be, that going back to school really started to look like a possibility. So I guess, did COVID have a huge impact on my decision to go back to school? Yes and no. I didn't know at the time. I looked at the 2-year diploma program and I thought to myself, okay, we'll be back on campus in a semester, maybe. And then here I am, 20 months later, and I've completed 75% of my program remotely, which I never would have thought possible. But much like Autumn, I didn't really see COVID as a pause in life or free time to quit working and indulge in a leisureful existence. Instead, I really saw it as more of an opportunity to increase my value in the workforce, expand my knowledge, and I guess build a more diverse network.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think it does make sense when something so crazy and unpredictable happens, it does cause you to kind of take pause and be like, oh, is this my chance to think about something different, think about doing things different? And sometimes we're kind of thrust, I'm just thinking that the theme of this conference is the challenge of change. And challenge can be, both leading to, difficulties, but also opportunities. And so, kind of being thrust into this new space where like, I'm not sure what the future looks like. Maybe there's an opportunity to take advantage of that and do something different that, maybe my path was going this way, and maybe it's time to kind of veer off this way and see, what's new and exciting. You hear of like I'm guilty of like, I've got so many COVID fur babies now. That was kind of my thing. I was like, hey, I'll be home more often. I can have pets now. But of course, that's a bit of a silly example, but it does kind of make you think, hey, I can do something that I didn't think I would do before, or that wasn't even on my radar until I was in this different context. So yeah, that's really great. And I'm really curious to kind of understand, we've talked to some of the faculty of the colleges and universities and trying to understand, like they've, made a huge shift in trying to cope with, a new learning environment, and especially in agriculture where things are typically very hands-on. We talk about, crop tours and field tours and, checking livestock. And, it's a very, hands-on program for the most part, no matter what you're studying in agriculture, it seems to be very hands-on. So I'm just wondering, when you think about your learning environment, your online learning environment, how was that sense of involvement or interaction achieved? And do you think that it was maybe there were parts that were missed, or do you think there were some really cool innovations that came out of that? And maybe Adam, I'll start with you this time. How was agriculture education achieved so well online in your experience? And then we'll maybe turn to some challenges and difficulties down the road.
Yeah, sure. So I remember early on, I had a few courses get very creative with trying to have that hands-on part. Remember most notably one of my first soils courses. We were testing the clay content of soil that we collected around our yard and garden. Mushed it together in our fingers and really felt it. And that didn't keep up for much longer because you can only play with dirt so much. But I really did enjoy how we were able to sort of use theory to still sort of understand the nuts and bolts of what agriculture is. And then I really had the pleasure of just this fall actually doing a very small in-person field trip where we visited a local farm, a research farm at the University of Manitoba that has agriculture technology implements in the field. And we got to interact with them and learn all about sort of how this technology is being used by real Manitoba farmers. I was a little apprehensive, not gonna lie, about sort of online learning, when I first went back to school, but now it's become the norm. I don't really see how I could ever go back to fully in person. I'm actually kind of getting used to, just logging on, doing my screen time. And I think really it's going to be either a blended model moving forward that I'm most comfortable with. But yeah, I've really enjoyed what online learning has provided. I could also go into a few more challenges if you'd like. I think back on it, really my biggest challenge, and we did mention this earlier, it was the feeling of isolation, right? I mean, you log in every single day and the monotony kicks in after a few weeks and months, and you really don't realize until you're in it, the schoolwork keeps piling on, and the course load is as heavy as it's ever been, and you all of a sudden feel cooped up, and it's not an ideal situation. Mm-hmm. To combat that, like I said before, I'm a student ambassador, so part of my role was to join student groups to try and get engagement with my fellow students. I started leading weekly online study sessions where I invited my fellow students to hang out with me on Zoom and study, but honestly, just talk about things, because I felt myself and in conversation with my fellow students, that's what people were lacking, right? We all feel this deep need for connection, and it's amplified when we're studying remotely. If I'm being completely honest, another challenge was building in discipline into my daily routine and time management. I've gotten a lot better since sort of I got used to the remote learning environment. But early on, only 25% of my week is delegated to online class calls. So the kitchen and snack time often became a really big distraction. And the freshman 15 really turned into the COVID 30 for me. So
Oh.
that's something moving forward, I'm definitely going to work on.
Oh, you bring up very many and very interesting points, Adam, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely, I can relate to and I'm not even a freshman, but having access to the fridge is right there, and yeah, and you're like, oh, I've been working all day. I'm just gonna lounge on the couch, and
One more snack.
you're like, when was the last time I was outside? Like, when did I last breathe fresh air? For goodness sakes. Yeah, I can relate to that for sure. But no, on the social isolation point, I think that's an important one too, because, you know, I was actually going to ask you, and I was interested in, what does socialization look like? And especially when, we were in lockdown and you couldn't see each other, like you were forbidden from leaving your house at sometimes. And you've had screen time for your classes, and then it's more screen time to socialize. And I don't know if the optometrists are going to be in great business when all this is over, but I certainly, yeah, like I've joined some networkings at night, but then I just find it so exhausting. Even though the power of connection is so awesome, you still kind of come away thinking, oh my gosh, my eyes are going to fall out of my head. Autumn, I'm wondering if we can turn to you in terms of, how are there examples like Adam shared of how, faculty got creative about how to, make agriculture education, exciting and interactive online, and kind of hit the mark there, but also, where you maybe have faced some challenges and difficulties. And I know you were talking about mental health earlier as a serious consideration. So I'd love to hear your comments.
Well, we're really lucky in the fact that Lakeland implemented a blended learning system right off the bat, which meant that I still got all of my labs in person. The only difference was instead of having a 2-hour lab, it was maybe a 45-minute lab. So our teachers had to get really creative on how to shorten things that are supposed to take 2 hours. So it might be like they give us part of the assignment at home to start, or like write up your procedure at home and then just come and do it in class. But it was really nice to still be able to go and use the equipment and be out. Like we got all these fields for the SMF like farm. So we could still go out to the field and we could check with compaction, or we could go look at residue management and like all those sorts of things. So that was a really nice thing about it. And even for lectures, we had blended lectures, which meant if you were struggling in a class, the option to go and sit in person and meet your instructor was there. You could go get that more personal experience. So that was really good because like Adam said, sometimes your motivation to get your assignments done right on that day is lacking. So sometimes it's easier to go in person and listen to the lecture and then spend the last 20 minutes asking the teacher questions and getting some more information that helps you out. So that was a cool bonus too. But like, yeah, that's really, because we had such the blended, we had so much in person, I guess. So it wasn't as bad. It was easier to manage. That being said, until this year when we were fully in person, I had never met my full class. There's just over 40 of us, I think, in our crop technology second year right now. And I had never been in a room with all of them. So on orientation day of this first semester of our second year, I sit in this classroom and I'm like, I don't know half of you. Like, I should know who you are. So the social connection didn't really start until closer into the second year. But
I was going to ask you about that because, yeah, with hybrid learning, I thought, oh, does that mean there was a little bit more opportunity or flexibility for socialization even if it's just the people on the student managed farm or in the labs, but maybe that kind of helped break the isolation a little bit. But it's still getting together for schoolwork and not, kind of meeting in the pub, right? So it's a different kind of socialization, I suppose. Okay, so we've talked about, some of the challenges or difficulties faced with the online learning environment. And now maybe we can switch to the advantages of online learning. Maybe there's been some silver linings or some, unique experiences that you wouldn't have had before. So perhaps we can swing to Autumn this time, and I can ask you about some of the advantages you found from online learning.
So we've had a couple really cool advantages with online learning. One being that we can get guest presenters from all over the world. So we had a presenter from New Zealand. We've had presenters from Texas. It lets us reach out farther. And instead of our teacher just having one camera in the classroom and putting it on the projector, he can see all of our faces individually because we're all on our own computers.
Nice.
So it's a little bit more like they're almost there. And it was much easier to ask questions because if you can't get your hand up, you just type it in the chat. So that was kind of cool because we got to learn more about agriculture all across the world instead of just Alberta and Saskatchewan. Mm-hmm. And another kind of cool thing for me being from a cow-calf operation is that come calving season, I was able to go home, be able to still attend my lectures, but I could help out on the farm a little bit more. When Dad and Mom were at work, I could watch all the heifers that were calving, and it was an extra set of eyes on the farm. So my family benefited from me being able to have that option, which is kind of cool because also by the time April rolls around, I kind of miss the farm and I really want to go home to it. So it was a nice little break.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I've heard some anecdotal stories, I guess maybe related to that, but where students are the parents are like, woohoo, I have an extra pair of hands on the farm. But then the students are like, okay, but I am still in school. I still need to block some time out for school. You can't just have me 24/7 to help out around the farm. But that's great. And the whole speaking thing, it's interesting because even for this conference, we're able to bring in folks from, that we would, have to play oodles and travel or whatnot. So, even thinking about how the online space has opened up our thinking about, who can be involved and how they can be involved. The one thing that I was thinking about as you were talking, Autumn, is, you kind of, I don't know, I'm just thinking about the tendency of people in different learning environments and, those that sit at the front of the class versus those that sit at the back of the class. But when you said, you can see everyone all at once, I thought, I wonder if that's a very strange experience for a lot of people, to just be we all are taking up the same amount of space. And, it's all of a sudden the teacher or the professor, is there's no sitting at the back of the class and nodding off, right? There's turning your camera off, but
that became an issue come middle of the semester. The teachers kind of gave up on telling us to turn our cameras on anymore, but we all tried our best when we had a guest coming in to make sure that they could see our face and it wasn't that they were just talking to a blank screen. Because, I don't know why we thought that was fair for our teachers to talk to a blank screen, but we tried to make it more of an inviting environment for them so that they would, when they could, maybe they could come in person eventually and they want to meet the students, I guess. So.
Oh, that's great. No, that's really cool. And how about you, Adam? Advantages of online learning that you discovered through this crazy journey?
I guess the main advantage, and this is, I guess, the main advantage of just remote existence now is just saving time on commuting and the hassle of traffic. I can wake up way later than I needed to before to get my butt to class. Another one that I found that I didn't quite think was going to be so crucial to my ability to learn was being able to actually set up a space in my home where I know once I sit down at my desk, it's study time. It's time to go to school, and I can get into that routine and that habit of when I'm in the study space, right? I'm 100% dedicated and I'm focused on my schoolwork that's in front of me. And I know when I was on campus, I didn't quite find studying in libraries to be always the perfect environment. There's chatter, and it's easy to just decide, oh, maybe I go grab a quick coffee. Oh, I bumped into a friend. Oh, no, I'm no longer studying. So, we can sit down and focus. That really, really helps. And I guess the final advantage is I got a chance to work remotely for my faculty as a student ambassador. So I've now developed additional skills outside the classroom that I would never have the opportunity to do before. So I found that really, really beneficial. And now I can imagine a future in which maybe I part-time work remotely because I've developed all these skills.
Nice. Yeah, I didn't even think of that, but I mean, it certainly makes sense. Like, even as we host events, there's more and more, in our case, producers comfortable with Zoom, comfortable with, going on camera and being able to, raise their hand and this, that, and the other. And that learning curve is kind of just, flattened out for a lot of people by force because we had no other way for interacting. But then, that kind of change it's almost like a forced change, but it means there's opportunities, down the road to take advantage of that, which is awesome. Makes a lot of sense. Great. Okay. And Lakeland has returned to in-class learning from kind of a hybrid learning environment. Is there any online components anymore, or is it back to kind of the way it was?
We are fully in person with 0 online, except we had 1 class online because we got a bunch of snow and roads were really icy and it just wasn't lovely outside. And we do have some students who drive about 40 minutes to get to the college. So the teacher made an online option just for safety reasons more than anything. So it is kind of cool that we have that option, that when things aren't safe for us to all travel there, you can still continue with the lecture. You don't have to push days back. You can still move forward. But other than that, fully in person, everything hands-on, back to pretty well normal.
And what comes to mind when I hear that is like, oh my God, no snow days? Are you joking? Like, I feel like that's like, add that to the con pile of like, oh man, I still have to go to my lesson.
We were talking about that because we get all the notifications when the high school buses are canceled. We're like, what happened to the day when you get that message that the buses are canceled and you just wait till the sun comes out and you and your friends go make snowmen in the yard or have a snowball fight? I'm like, online learning took that away from us. Yeah. But it's a cool option now.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And so with the return to completely in classes, or anything you miss about the online learning environment where you think, it'd be nice if we kind of brought these elements back into even in-class learning or carried on with online learning for some things?
Not overly, except for we use Microsoft Teams as our format, like our platform for all of our lectures. And so there's the breakout room option where we'd split into smaller groups to do certain things. And when you're in a full lecture, you don't usually get that option to split into those groups as often. So, I mean, that could be a cool little addition for a little bit more small group work and getting to know your peers a little bit better. But other than that, there's not much to do with the learning side. I mean, we can go back to when it's minus 40 outside and I do not want to walk to class. It's kind of nice to stay in my sweats and a hoodie in my warm dorm and do my lecture. But that has nothing to do with the education side.
That's more of a self-comfort, but it's also important, right? All right, that's great. Thanks, Autumn and Adam. So Manitoba has been online this entire time, and word through the grapevine is that they're returning to in-class in January. I think that's the plan. What are your thoughts on that? What are you thinking? What are you excited about? What are you worried about? And if they do return to all in class all the time, do you think there's kind of aspects of online learning that should be carried over to the in-class experience?
Yeah, so we as students still haven't got the official green light, but there's definitely a lot of whispers that we're going back in person in January. So fingers crossed. For whether or not it's good or not, I'm kind of mixed on that. You know, many of my classmates are from rural Manitoba, so I feel for them. You know, having to make that decision so quickly to have to race back to the city to come to the university. You know, how can they find apartments fast enough, and you know, what's transportation going to look like for them? Um, I guess the aspect of online learning that I really want to keep, number one, would be the ability to carry around two monitors with me at all times, so I can have all of my things perfectly organized in front of me because I've become accustomed to my home office, and I don't know how I'm ever going to go back to just my laptop. All seriousness, though, I think allowing students flexibility in how they can access the required information and then kind of be creative in the way they convey their understanding to our professors are going to be huge, as well as allowing students to kind of voice their requests to their professors. You know, when deadlines are getting tight and midterms are looming, there's a couple of times where, you know, us as a remote class have kind of said to a few of our instructors, hey, would you mind moving a deadline for this or that assignment because, you know, we have some other things we want to attend to, and the instructor was understanding and being, you know, able to play the ball that way. One thing that I really found beneficial that I didn't think I would was having all my lectures recorded so I could go back and, oh yeah, what did they say? And then, you know, actually take better notes. So I think in the future, maybe making lectures optional to attend, but they're recorded, and then maybe just make labs mandatory to attend, I think would be kind of the ideal. So yeah, that's kind of that.
That makes a heck of a lot of sense. I'm just thinking back to my days, and I had these like spiral bound, notebooks, and trying to read your own handwriting. Of course, like the teacher's talking a mile a minute, and you're trying to scribble it all down, and then you're studying for midterms or your exam, and you're like, what is that word? Yeah, I didn't even think of that, but man, that would have been so handy to go back and be like, I'm just going to rewatch the lesson and not rely on my notes. Or, if you have a sick day, or if, you've got another obligation, especially when you're in agriculture, those things come up with farming in the family, to be able to be like, you know what, it's okay because I can make up for it later, rather than, your world comes crashing down because you missed that, pre-midterm lecture, and they scare the bejesus out of you. Like, don't miss this lecture, whatever you do, there's going to be a hint for the midterms. So, well, and kind of, you bring up a good point as well. I was going to ask about, in terms of teacher interactions, I was always super terrified to go to, the after hours, like the office hours, right after class. I was like kind of the girl like in the middle, and I was like, oh my God, I never want to talk to a teacher. I'm too shy and they're going to think I'm stupid. But I have a feeling that, kind of the online learning environment broke down some barriers, and Adam, you commented on that a little bit, but maybe you could flesh that out a little bit more for us too, in terms of, do you find it's easier to, kind of develop a rapport and an interpersonal relationship with your teachers, having been through this online experience? And then I'll ask Autumn the same thing. So maybe starting with you, Adam.
So I kind of got into the mindset of, I saw my instructors as like celebrities because they were on the screen every day. And like, my classmates that I saw that actually turned their cameras on every day with me, like they became my idols. So when I actually got to meet a couple of them in person at this little in-person field trip this fall, I was starstruck. I was like, oh my goodness, look at you existing in the flesh. And I was like just blown away that they were real people. I totally forgot the question. Now I made myself laugh too hard.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, it was just, whether, well, and it sounds like maybe it had the opposite effect, but, whether the online environment made it easier to interact with teachers and feel more, I guess, open to kind of, give opinions or ask questions, or even, check in on assignments if you're not sure about pieces. Did you find that some of those, maybe barriers were broken down because you saw them more often in more personally on an online environment?
So what we did have was a weekly, like small cohort meeting where we just met and discussed anything and everything from how we were feeling about the coursework we were going through. The good thing about the Diploma of Agriculture program is, the 50 of us that are in this 2-year program, we're all taking the same classes together and we're moving along. So we really feel each other's pain when coursework gets tight, and the faculty and staff did a really, really good job, like keeping communication open with us in those weekly meetings. And they made it fun too. I mean, there was all sorts of competitions between the different smaller cohort groups, and I really, really enjoyed, being able to approach my instructors and the faculty, in a really low stakes environment like that, because you can raise points that you might not be able to in class all the time. So I really appreciated that.
Cool. That sounds good. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of advantages there. It makes me want to go back to school. I'm like, I wish we had that. Adam, how about you? Did you find the online learning environment facilitated, an easier connection with your teachers or interacting? Did you have kind of that weekly cohort session where you could talk about what's working, what's not, or how did that experience go for you?
Well, I've never been an overly shy person, so reaching out to instructors never scared me, but I could tell which kids in my class definitely, they didn't want to go out for that help, or they didn't want to voice their opinions or their thoughts in class. But with a chat option on Teams, they were more willing to type it and still say it. And it didn't mean they had to turn their mic on. They didn't have to actually say it, but they still got their input. So that was kind of a nice thing to see, because like even now in my second year, I can realize those kids aren't talking again. They're back to being quiet in classes, but once in a while they would throw that one piece of information or their real life experience into the chat for us to read about, which was kind of cool. We never had cohort meetings of any such, but because we had labs in person, that was kind of our socialized time. We could, and also because our lab groups got split, there's only about 10 of us per lab. So that became your cohort essentially, because you really got to know those 9 other students, but it also gave you that chance to talk to the instructor on a little bit more of a casual basis. I have a couple of instructors who have nicknames for me at this point. This year I have an instructor who calls me Winter as a joke. So like we broke down some of those barriers into less of they're much higher than me and more of they're just here to help guide me and provide me with some knowledge that I don't have yet. So it definitely helped a little bit, but it was more the in-person labs and the socialization that really gave us that benefit.
Yeah. Well, and that makes a lot of sense too. Having that chat window available, like that's my default, even when I'm in, industry meetings and I'm supposed to be this, big, brave woman, but, sometimes it is an intimidating space, but being able to be like, I have something to say. I just don't want to interrupt the masses and, and call attention to me, but being able to kind of say, okay, it's out there. People can react to it without, raising your hand in a room of 50 people or whatever. That makes a lot of sense for sure. So, all right. So there's been in class and online, and Adam, you're getting ready for in class. So, given all that experience, and we've talked, I guess, a little bit about that, but just cutting to the chase, if you could design your own learning experience for your own programs, whether it's online, in class, combination of both, what would the ideal learning experience look like having been through COVID and a very different learning environment? Adam, I'll start with you because you're nodding at me.
Well, yeah, sure. So luckily, I have designed my own learning experience. I work for a nonprofit called Can You Canada that actually is a partner with the University of Manitoba. We teach students ages 10 to 17 all about the different faculties on campus. So this past spring and summer, I designed my own blended learning experience, which was an online Zoom session, followed by a small in-person group session in a garden classroom, where I taught the students all about agriculture as a possible field of study, and also taught them about gardening as a fun way to enjoy the fruits of your labor.
Cool.
Found, giving a weekly lecture on a topic followed by like an in-person hands-on thing, sort of dirt under the fingernails, was a great way to keep the students engaged, keep them coming back every single week, wanting to learn, being excited about learning. So I think moving forward, as much as online learning gives us, the screen fatigue kicks in, and at some point you have to be around other people. That's why I envy like the in-person labs. Like I wish I had that. So yeah, there's more ways that you should be able to participate than just sitting behind your desk. And I guess that comes back to, how could we actually improve online learning? I've been thinking a lot about this. To me, it comes down to like, how can we innovate the way that students are tested or change the way that information is presented? I know it seems like a really big ask, but I do believe that the experience going through now could use a bit of an overhaul. That's not to say the universities didn't do anything right. They did everything as well as they could. But I did find at times my classmates and myself were kind of growing tired of yet another multiple choice, true, false, short answer, discussion board, PowerPoint presentation with a lecture for 45 minutes to an hour. So I think really more universities should focus on maybe developing resources and encourage their professors to be real trailblazers in the way that they teach. Not only will they get more from their students then in their attention and their attendance, but I think they might actually stumble upon new successful methodologies, right? That the professors across courses and faculties can share with each other that might actually foster more engagement in both the students' success and the success of the educators. I'm not exactly sure how this will be achieved. I have a few ideas. I mean, maybe it's different types of slide sets or infographics that present information in a more graphically appealing and exciting way. Maybe it's the use of virtual whiteboards that I've seen people use, different classroom brainstorm sessions or different type of review sessions. Maybe it's more student-led lectures where students are assigned, a chapter, and then they have to teach the class about that. That way, you as a student are learning by teaching, and that's a really well-known method for building understanding. I know my favorite classes were small group work. When you're in a breakout room of 5 people or less, that's the most effective online time, because the second you get into bigger groups, 10, 15, 20, people tune out, they turn off their video, they turn off their microphones. So really, it's finding new and exciting ways to be engaged. My favorite assignment, my absolute favorite one, was my instructor said, here's a topic, create a 2-minute video that's engaging and exciting, describing what we learned. So, I mean, the feedback that students gave about that assignment, we all loved it. It was amazing. It was new. You're telling me I could make a video to convey my understanding instead of having to write another essay? That sounds great.
Yeah. And again, you're onto different and new and exciting skills that can be transferred to, to anything that you're doing down the road. Oh, that's really cool. And it makes me think as well, because the rhetoric seems to be, oh gosh, can we just get back to normal when we kind of know what we're doing and everyone's comfortable? But maybe, we should think about, just because we can doesn't mean we should. Should we return to things as normal, or should we look at, a totally different path going forward? Not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but certainly picking up on those ideas around, hey, we found a way to, engage more people and appeal to the learning preferences and practices along the way. So let's take that with us and, march forward, as it were. How about you, Autumn? If you were to kind of design your ideal, learning experience, given, especially because you've been, in-class hybrid, online only, if you could kind of, be Dr. Frankenstein and put the pieces together to create your ideal learning experience, what do you think that would look like?
Labs 100% in person all the time. That's a no-brainer. That's a necessity, especially in agriculture, for that practical hands-on experience to actually get your hands dirty and figure out what you're actually learning. I liked having the option to do a lecture online, but I definitely learn a lot more being in the classroom and being able to ask questions in person. But I wouldn't want to get rid of the option that during calving season, when I need at home, I can still go home. Or or when something's going on in my life or I'm not feeling well, I don't have to miss the lecture. I can still sign in and attend it and still gain some of the knowledge. But a really cool thing that we did that links onto your final exams is one of my instructors, instead of having your classic multiple choice and written response final, he gave us a project final. And so what the project was, it was in our tillage class. And what we had to do was he gave us a question. There's like 8 different questions. So he split us up and we all got different ones. And basically you listened to an audio clip. And it was like someone had left you a voicemail as if you're a sales rep for a company, some sort of equipment company. And what you had to do is pretend to call them back and give them a voicemail back of the rundown of why that equipment would be a good fit for their farm, what it could do for agronomic purposes, and what kind of benefits comes with it. Which I really actually, as much as I was stressed out for 24 hours trying to get this thing done, I much more love doing that than going into my computer and onto our learning platform and writing a test, which is not nearly as much fun. So the idea that we could do more of a digital project and less paperwork was kind of cool. And I feel like I gained more knowledge out of that than I would of any test I would ever write.
Nice. Well, and yeah, there's so many more ways to test your knowledge and skills than, memorization, which was what I did. I mean, some stuff, you do understand, but others it's just like, okay, can I come up with a little jingle to remember, these chemicals or to remember this. But, really being able to demonstrate the inherent knowledge, like I understand how this works and how it's applied, and it's not just repeat after me. That makes a lot of sense.
And it helped facilitate that industry connection too. Because obviously some sort of a sales rep of some sort, it might not be equipment, but I'm looking into seeding, chemical, and fertilizer. I want to go be a crop advisor basically. So it also helps with a little bit more of that, just being able to strike up that conversation and be able to make that up on the spot more or less as to how to speak it over the phone. So I also gain more practical knowledge as well. There's more of a life lesson to it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're like, hey, I've been in their shoes. I get this from more than one angle. Oh, that's really cool. Very good. All right. So I think our time is wrapping up for this student discovery session. But another question I have, and the answer can be as short or as long as you want. Do you think that education has been positively, negatively, or not affected by COVID-19? Adam, let's start with you.
Sure. I mean, really, all things considered, I think the quality of my education hasn't been affected by COVID-19. The University of Manitoba, they've provided me ample resources and opportunities through our time in this remote environment. I think the most detrimental and negatively impacting thing about COVID-19 was the mental health aspect. We've talked about it a few times. It really did hinder, with less connection than I desired, being fully remote, my capacity to be able to, make my educational requirements and responsibilities at certain times during the semester. Again, a large part of that is due to that isolation factor. I have been asking my classmates this, on the eve of going back into person, this same question. And while I didn't experience this myself, I do recall a conversation I had with one of my classmates who is a parent, and she specifically came back to school to finish her education because of COVID. All classes became remote, allowing her to finish her degree in a way which before COVID would not have ever been possible. So in that respect, I don't think we can look at it as COVID was a positive or negative. It depends really who you are and what your situation is. I remember back in the day when I was an on-campus student, before I came back as a mature student, a large part of the material was offered online anyway, and we submitted assignments online. So truthfully, if I'm thinking about it, all COVID really took away from us was live lectures and social stuff on campus, which in retrospect were the only activities keeping us together as students throughout the semester. As again, they broke up that monotony of student life. So do I miss online learning, or will I miss it? Yes. Am I excited to go back in person? 100%. I cannot wait, like I said, to meet fellow students. Overall, COVID learning has been an interesting experience, one I wouldn't want to go through again, but I think has provided us a lot of lessons to take and learn from moving forward.
All right. That's a very diplomatic answer, but a very good answer. Thanks, Adam. I like that a lot. It depends. But with some meat behind that as well. And Adam, how about you? Do you think that education in general and your education specifically has been positively, negatively, or not really affected by COVID-19?
I would fully agree with Adam that the quality of the content that we were given hasn't changed, like the quality of the education, because all the resources were there. We got all the information. We still had access to anyone we needed help to. It just maybe wasn't knocking on an office door. It was just sending an email or setting up a meeting. So like the quality of the education itself wasn't affected. I think it really mattered what type of person you were. Whereas if you were the type of person who could set those deadlines and could actually follow a schedule, you had that space, like Adam said, he's got his office set up to work in. So if you had that set up and you were more willing to put in the effort, I guess is more or less, then it really didn't change. I mean, your social life, you had to be a little more creative, but like it wasn't that bad. You can make do. I definitely would say personally it was negatively a little bit because I'm a very social person. I love people. And after about a month, I was like, okay, I need to go do something. Like, can we go, even if it was just, can we go have a fire at someone's house? Can we go do something? Just like, I need people. So that was where my experience probably went negatively a little bit, because once I lacked the social aspect, I also started to see that I lacked my ability to put some effort into schoolwork, more or less. Found myself procrastinating. I was doing assignments way late, handing them in right at, like midnight when they were due. So, I mean, overall, the quality of the education and the material itself didn't change. It just mattered as to how you looked at it and how you approached it, more or less.
And again, I mean, so much just depends on where you're coming from and how you like to absorb information, how do you like to interact. And I think as well, like I've heard a lot of conversations about introverts and extroverts, and there's a lot of joking that goes along with it as well. But I mean, I'm a self-professed introvert, although when I tell people that, they're like, yeah, right. But no, like honestly, like for myself, COVID, not going to, industry events where you've got to schmooze and rub shoulders and stuff, like I would much rather just, hide behind a computer and get stuff done. So it's kind of been like good for me in that way. And I don't have a problem with, or I'm not challenged by social isolation in the same way, but I totally understand because I have friends and family that just, they feed off of the energy of others, and that gives them energy and passion and excitement. And so I can, kind of feel their pain, and like, yeah, that must be really hard. You can really understand that. So,
And
all right. So, oh, go ahead,
one
Autumn.
thing to add. I also lived on campus still, even like when we all went through online to blended to fully in person. I've lived on campus the whole time. And both years I had 3 roommates. And so I found that my roommates became that social, the little bit of social that I sometimes needed. And so that makes me think that those students who lived out on their own with no roommates suffered even more than I did, because I still had these 3 other girls that we could still have a movie night, or we could make a cake and decorate it together, or whatever we wanted. So definitely the fact that I chose to live on campus was a very good choice rather than trying to do this all on my own.
Yeah. Well, you guys have shared, some really, really great, great advice as we're, kind of winding our way through your story and through your experience. So I definitely have to thank you so much for being so candid and being so open and honest with us in this conversation. And I guess, before we go, is there anything that we missed in this discussion as we're trying to share with, the rest of the conference attendees? What has it been like being a student through the COVID-19 experience, the good, bad, and the ugly, as we say, and what lessons can we take moving forward? I think you've both done a stellar job of sharing your journey and your advice and your insights. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
I think we covered it pretty good. I don't think there's really anything else other than literally the biggest thing was your mental health and the social aspect of it all, really.
So my main MO in life is to never doubt yourself and always put yourself in a position where you can succeed and overcome challenges that you never thought possible. I was really nervous to go back to school as a mature student after basically not being a student at a higher education institution for almost 10 years. And I, thought to myself long and hard about going back to school or just staying in the workforce. And going back to school as a mature student was the best decision I ever made. This has challenged me in ways I never thought possible. And I am so grateful that I had the opportunity to go back to school in the way that we did. And I'm almost happier I got to do it during COVID in this remote environment, because I could, like you said, hide behind the laptop and do things that maybe would have been a lot harder if I was actually in a room with a bunch of my fellow students who were a decade younger than me. So I really think that no matter who you are or what you do, going back and furthering your education, no matter how young or old you are, is always a good decision. And I'm really glad that I chose to go on this journey.
Wonderful. Thanks, Adam. Well, and I wish you both tremendous success in the rest of your learning journey, and I look forward to following your learning journey through through social media, but certainly through the wonderful folks at Lakeland and University of Manitoba that propped both of you up and said, Heather, you've got to talk to these two. They're shining stars out there. So I really, really appreciate the time that you've taken to share your experience and your journey, and wish you all of the best going forward, and look forward to our paths continuing to cross. So thanks very much, Adam and Autumn.
Thank you very much for having us, Heather.
Thank you for your time. It was wonderful.
You're welcome.